Hi, this is Grandin Gill. What I'm going to cover in this presentation is an overview of the article types for the Muma Business Review, and this is a first cut assessment. Doubtless before the review goes live, we'll add types, remove types, and refine them. But this is what we're going to start with. And in this presentation, I'm just going to briefly go over the dozen or so templates that we have created, and then I'll have more detailed presentations on each individual template. And these are Exhibit 10 of the Muma Business Review case. So the first type of article that we have is what we call a relevant theory article. And the idea here of this article is that you're going to explain some theory that you may have encountered in the literature that is kind of obscure from a practitioner point of view. So what you're trying to do is translate the notions in the theory into something that folks in practice can understand. The second article type is an empirical findings article. And the idea here is that you're going to be presenting some results based on observation or statistical analysis, once again in a manner that practitioners will be able to understand. And of particular note here is that in a regular research article, you'll almost always tie these results to some theory or other. And while you can do that in the empirical findings article, you're not necessarily required to. In some cases, the findings may be interesting enough in and of themselves that you don't have to create a theory around them, because what you're trying to do is interest people in practice. The research case study is an example of a storytelling, and because we're calling it a research case study, what we will do is we will normally introduce some theory and then use the case study as an example of that theory. Now, we have another type of case submission, which is the example case study. And the big difference between the example case study and the research case study is in the example case study, the research is the star. In the example case study, the example is the star of the show, the case itself, whereas in the research case study, the theory is the star of the show and the case is used for illustrative purposes. So essentially they have some of the same contents, but in the research case study, theory comes first. In the example case study, the case, the story comes first. Another type of paper that we have is what we call the novel idea paper. And this is where you're proposing some idea, either perhaps based on observation or just based on your own analysis and experience. And so in a sense, it gives you an opportunity to create a new theory. You can tie it into the literature if you choose to. However, an extensive literature review is not required for the novel idea. You simply should have looked at the literature enough to know that your idea is actually novel. The research debate is a type of article with built-in tension. And what you're trying to do here is take some concept, typically from the research literature, that either disagrees with what practitioners think or which produces debate among researchers. And your idea is to explain the nature of the debate and, if possible, to kind of reconcile it. We're not necessarily looking for you to come out on one side or another. We're trying to help understand the debate. An example I often use is that of the question as to whether it's better to have highly intelligent employees or highly conscientious employees. And according to the research literature, what you really want is the highly intelligent employees, yet you ask most managers and they would weigh down on the side of conscientiousness. The next category of MBR submission is the research question review. And the idea of a research question review is that you take a question of interest to practice, and I'm calling them research questions here, but really we could also describe them as business problems. And you are looking at the literature to try and determine what the key findings relating to this business problem or research question is. And It falls short of the traditional literature summary, which you might find in the research literature, and that we're not asking you necessarily to blend theory with your analysis. We're not necessarily trying to have you make sense of the analysis. We're simply trying to get you to get the big picture, a sentence or two out of what each article that you find in the literature says. After that, we have the opinion pieces, and the opinion piece is one of the few types of MBR submission that does not come with a reviewer appendix. Normally, what we do in the MBR is we have a reviewer appendix that details how the research you're reporting on was conducted, and that is very important for ensuring that the journal is grounded in research and is done in a rigorous manner. But for opinion pieces, we will allow for the fact that what is being submitted is an opinion. Normally, we're going to focus on practitioners submitting opinion pieces as opposed to faculty or DBA candidates who are more likely to report findings based on research. But the opinions of practice are very important, and so we want to have an option open for them to submit to the journal. Industry analyses is another type of submission we would take. In many ways, this is inspired by what business schools such as Harvard did in their early days, which was to do analyses of local industries such as shoe manufacturing, with the notion that that was going to be a valuable contribution to practice. Well, we think that's still potentially a valuable contribution to practice, and so you have the ability to submit that as a type of research, even though you're more likely to be using things like census databases and other government sources as opposed to necessarily the research literature. Research summaries for practice are essentially intended as a summary of an important research project that practitioners should be interested in, even if they aren't necessarily going to be able to read the original report or article where the research came from. These are shorter submissions than would normally be made to the MBR. And what we hope is that when people submit a dissertation, they will create one of these 1 to 3 page articles as a way of just reporting what they found. But it is also possible to write such a research summary about an article that you've read, which you think has some valuable contributions to management, but which is unreadable by management the way it was presented, say, in an academic journal. An interview article is an article that essentially reports an interview, and the bulk of these articles will in fact be the interview written in question and answer format. Typically, an interview article will be judged based upon the caliber of the individual being interviewed, and of course, what type of insights come out of that interview. Finally, we have a research method review. A research method review would typically be a study of a particular technique, such as the use of big data for research, or maybe some statistical technique, which you think would be of value to managers, but which managers might not necessarily know about. So those are the 12 templates that we have available for the Muma Business Review, and we have a short separate presentation on each template talking about the highlights, but this should give you the big picture of what we have that is currently available.